Okay, this is navigation. We are a stone's throw away from the pilot house, the bridge. Captain's office is right there. Captain and the navigator are joined at the hip, pretty much. What you see here is a navigator's chart table, but what you're seeing here is something I didn't even know we had in World War II until I joined the ship. This is a computer. This is an analog computer. So you see a bunch of knobs, dials, servos, wires. It's a lot more complicated than that. This is how far we've come. We went from that to that. Pretty amazing if you think about it. How that worked is we took what information we could get right here. Put the information in here. Come on up, Scotty. A light's going to shine in that little circle there, and it's going to move along with the ship. And that little light's going to shine right here, and it's going to move as we move. The problem with this is there's two things that this could not tell us. So you see knots, you see compass. By the way, the clock, somebody took the winder for the clock. It's not going to tell us two things. Anybody want to guess what it's not telling us? It's not telling us what the wind's doing to us, and it's not telling what the current is doing to us. Okay? So we constantly had to replot. And we did it right there. We did what the ancient mariners did going back to the 1800s. Is we had a chronometer, and we plotted the stars. And we figured out where we were in adjusted to Greenwich Mean Time. That's about as much as I know about the longitudinal issue. The guy that invented that clock, basically, he worked on it all his life. The award from the Crown of England in the 1700s was somewhere around 20,000 pounds, which is about $12 million to this day. And he figured out that the Crown got tired of losing their ships and not going where they were supposed to be when they were supposed to get. Britain owned the waves for hundreds of years. So he figured that out. We could also use the other item that's right behind you. It's called LORAN. It's long distance radio navigation. And LORAN requires a series of radio towers. They send up a beam. They're on a specific point. We steer to those towers. It's like aircraft. If you ever see across the desert, there's these round, they're white, and they got teepee. There's a teepee. They're huge. They're in the middle of nowhere. It's basically how we navigate is what aircraft do. They find the next tower, the next tower, the next tower, the next tower, the next tower. Well, we had that capability in World War II. Well, that was fine around the United States, but for some reason the Japanese wouldn't let us put it on their islands. I don't know why. It came into prevalence in the 50s and the 60s. And then, of course, navigation, satellite navigation supplanted that. So we kind of had to figure out where we were and constantly replot. And that's what these guys are doing. The quartermasters are going to be doing this, but the navigator, who's very good in math, and I wasn't, so that's as good. You got my knowledge right there. What else we got? We show the coffee cups because you got to remember, life in World War II, it's all about coffee, cigarettes, and ice cream. I'll talk a little bit about ice cream later, but ashtrays are everywhere. Everybody smoked. I mean, it is what it is. If you guys didn't know, we recovered Apollo, the first two moonshots, Apollo's 11 and Apollo 12. This is a shot of the quartermasters, and from what story I've gotten, that is an actual shot. It's not staged. That Apollo was coming down in bad weather. If anybody remembers 69, 70, there were still only 3 major TV networks. It was a major world event. Well, bad weather makes for bad press and bad TV. So they had to delay the burn a little bit to get it back to where they wanted. We also had to figure out exactly where it's coming down. I'm told that's a piece of equipment that was very secretive back in the 60s and 70s. It was actually satellite navigation. I didn't know that either. I thought satellite navigation was 80s, 90s at the earliest. We had it back in the 60s, mainly for our submarines. But we needed to know exactly where it was coming down. And supposedly, unless I'm told differently, that piece of equipment was right here, and then it was removed when the ship went into mothballs, because it was still secret in 1970. So, captain's office. He's going to be either here, his cabin is right around the corner, or he's going to be at his chair, or one other spot, and maybe getting some food later on. But there's a lot of activity going on right here, especially between the captain and the navigator. Okay? Questions? No? Okay. Come on through. The area would have been open to the elements. That was closed in the 50s. Okay? So what you see would have been the closed-in part of the bridge in World War II days. Now what you're looking at is how we con or control the ship. This is tied directly to our single rudder, okay, power steering, okay. The helmsman is going to be looking at these devices right here, because obviously looking out the window is not going to do you a darn bit of good. I got a junior helmsman over here, and this is the gas pedal, even though it's not directly connected to our engines. If you guys went on the engine tour, each one of those engines is 37,500 horsepower, 150,000 horsepower. You just don't push the gas pedal and make it go. We've got to tell the engine room what kind of speed we want, and this is an engine order telegraph. So we're going to tell them what to do. They're going to answer it. We're going to see our little arrow, and they're going to give us the speed we require. They're going to open up the steam, and life is good. If we require a different speed, that's what's on these, because this is 1/3, 2/3, full. We're going to dial up the exact RPMs we want. And the reason why we would use that is if we were doing underway replenishment, which one of those ships would be over here giving us oil, or we would be giving them something or whatever, we got to match his speed. So he might be doing 12 knots. So we're going to dial up the exact speed that he is at, and then they're going to answer us right here. And they're going to give it to us here and match it right here. Okay, so that's how that's done. I've oversimplified it obviously, but you have more to the tour. If this is damaged in any way, and by the way, during general quarters, the captain is going to be here, the first officer or the exec is going to be here. That's the forecastle, where the anchor chains are. If you haven't been up there, it's all the way up front. Like pilots, it's at the pointy end of the ship. You can see we have duplicated equipment right there, because we are a major target. If any Japanese were to have hit us, they're going for the flight deck. That's the first thing you're going to put out. And if I didn't mention earlier, we were never hit by a Japanese kamikaze. We were never hit by a Japanese bomb. We were one of the few carriers that was not touched. And we were out to sea for 16 months after the last 2 years of the war, we were out there. We never made it back to port. So all those kamikaze attacks that were hitting everybody else, they never touched the Hornet. They got close, but they never touched it. I apologize for the small picture, but if we were doing underway replenishment, that's what you'd see. You never want to stop in the middle of the ocean, because you stop your target. Okay? So for the same reason we don't turn on our lights, we don't stop. So if we need something, or we need to transfer something off the ship, we're going to do what's called an unwrap. There's a chair over here. When you walk around, you're going to be able to see it, and that's where the captain's going to sit during the unwrap. Always done on that side, as far as I know. In this bottom picture, there's 3 ships. And I've been told by other docents, during Vietnam, there was one instance that he got so close to the next ship, because he was officer of the deck, you could literally touch the ship next to you. But you're moving, you can't stop. So that's what's going on. It's called an unwrap. We have bunker oil, and they told you down in the engine room that bunker oil is about as close to dinosaurs as you're going to get. It's thick, it's gooey, it doesn't move unless you heat it up to about 350 degrees. So if we had to pump oil, they would take the hose, they would jam it down in one of the voids or the storage tanks, and they would pump oil. Now as that oil gradually raised, so did the hose. So before they figured out modern safety devices, that hose sometimes could pop out and spray hot oil everywhere. Which 350 degree oil is not going to kill you. It's going to hurt, but it's the cleanup that's the problem, right? Nowadays, from what I understand, they have turnbuckles that are going to move kind of like your shoulder does, and it's all safe and nice. But they didn't have that in World War II. We have different horns. This is a collision alarm that I'm told if we were pumping steam, this would probably wake up most of San Francisco. Port and starboard alarms over here. The chemical alarm. Just all kinds of things. By the way, you guys know what a sound-powered phone is? I know you do, but these are sound-powered phones. You see these all over the ship. And the best way to describe it is when you were a kid and you did one of your very early science experiments. You took a tin can. Your friend took a tin can. He stood about 20 yards down the way with a string, and you tightened it, and you talked to each other. And that sound waves bounced across that string. It's the principles of a sound phone. We don't need power to make it work. When you come around the corner, you're going to see the captain's sea cabin. So he's got a desk, a bed, a shower, and a potty. If he's not in there, he's over there, or up there in the front, or possibly touring other parts of the ship. But when times get busy, he's going to be right here. He's not going anywhere else. Okay? this way. Oh, by the way, one real quick note. I'm sorry, everybody remembers the crane, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, here. Let me go back in a second. Go back in, I'm sorry. One of my favorite parts, I gotta tell you. We, during Apollo, we had to pick up the astronauts and the capsule. But we couldn't do it at the same time. We're not gonna lift the capsule out of the water. We good? Okay. We're going down one runway. Would have been in here. Nobody else would be here. There'd be no reason for it. Probably have a table here, some easels. What does an admiral do? Well, first of all, the Hornet was such a storied ship that the admiral, when we were in part of a task force, we were the flagship. It's just the way it worked out. So we always had an admiral. He would have been here with his staff. What does an admiral do on the task force? Well, he's responsible for getting the whole bunch of ships to whatever island we're going to go attack. So the captain is in charge of the Hornet. The admiral is in charge of that. All those ships. And what you don't see there are the transports that are going to be with those ships that are carrying the Marines, whatever we need to pull on shore. So we're talking hundreds of ships going from here to that island to kick the Japanese off that island, whatever island that might be. So we need a defense ring, which is what you're looking at. We've got 2 light carriers and 2 carriers our size in the middle of this group. We put them in the middle because we want to be protected. We want to get our aircraft to that island to carry out missions against that island. Surrounding us, in this particular shot, there's 5 battleships, including the USS Missouri. We want their big guns for shore battery. We want their little guns to protect us, anti-aircraft protection. We've got cruisers for doing the same thing. On the very, very outskirts, we have what's called the tin cans, or the destroyers. Anybody know what the destroyers are looking for?
Submarines.
Submarines. The destroyers have the capability because they have the sonar. Now, we have sonar too, and the Essex-class carriers had the capability of putting a depth charge rack on the stern. From what I've read in the past, not saying this is 100% truth or not, but we did have one captain that did install those depth charge racks on the stern. Now, no captain in his right mind is going to go hunt submarines with an aircraft carrier. It doesn't happen. But he did. And I'm not sure where they are back there. I've tried to walk back there, and I have no idea. I can't tell. But anyway, the destroyers, that's what they're looking for. And yes, they are expendable. There's some great heroics that took place in World War II with our destroyers going up against the giant Yamato and Musashi Japanese battleships and getting blown out of the water. But quite courageous people that served on those. Because they are going to sacrifice themselves before anybody gets to the carrier, in theory. Out 50 miles on each corner are going to be radar pickets. Now, what are those guys looking for? Also destroyers. What are they looking for? Aircraft. We have good radar, probably better than most, but not to where it is today. For example, the outdated aircraft, the F-14 that's on the deck. In its heyday, it carried what's called the Phoenix missile. It carried 3 types of missiles, the Phoenix, the Sparrow, and the Sidewinder or AMRAAM. And the guy in the back seat could track multiple Russian bombers at over 100 miles out and shoot them down, theoretically, with that missile. That's how far we've come from the 40s until, in that case, the 70s. So we don't have that here. Our radar is good for about this far. So we want to know if there's an incoming threat so we can scramble our aircraft and get them up in the sky and meet that threat. By this time of the war, when you see task force like this, biggest thing we had to worry about was the kamikazes. Because all the good Japanese pilots, by that time of the war, they're pretty much gone, shot down. So that's then. So that's the admiral. That's what he's doing. He's giving orders on where to take this whole task force. This is now. Okay. We have a lot more capabilities. Number one, with computers. Everybody knows the term networking. I can take the frigate right there. He can be in charge of all the anti-aircraft protection on the whole fleet. Because he can network everybody's computers. He can even network into the computers that are in the airplanes. And if I have a threat coming in this direction, he can, one ship can direct that threat from that direction. A lot different than here when everybody's kind of on their own. Okay? So, big difference between, and oh, by the way, what you don't see, part of the task force now, is we have submarines out there. Submarine is still our biggest threat. The newer submarines, the diesel boats, when they're running on electric power, it's almost impossible to hear them. So they are still your major threat. Now, I'm told by one of the docents, everybody, if you don't know, we played games with the Russians all the time in the 60s and 70s. It was the Cold War. We were always threatening to shoot them down, and they were threatening to shoot us down, and so forth. But I'm told one story was a Russian boat. They were seen by a Hawkeye or a tracker, I don't know which. That boat surfaced right there, right behind the carrier and right in front of the ship that was behind the carrier. So he had a firing solution on the carrier as well as the ship behind him because they saw the mast sticking out of the water. He got in that close. I don't know how you could, but he did. So there's still that game that goes on. Our submarines actually play with the carriers all the time, see who's going to get caught and who's not going to get caught. It keeps you sharp, I guess. There's us in white. There's a super carrier in black. It's a really good example of the size. And they have to be that big now. They really do. And, you know, we're no small chicken. We're 900 feet long. We carried 80 aircraft. We had, 3,000 people? I mean, you can double that on these guys. So, a couple of quick stories. I'm going to let you guys loose. There was quite a character admiral that served on this ship. His name was Joe Clark. His nickname was Jocko. His picture's on the desk right there. Jocko, when you get to the admiral's rank, it's like being a general. You're a politician. You got to please everybody. You don't get to that flag rank unless you are good at what you do. Jocko was more known for being a sailor's admiral than an admiral's admiral. He pissed off a lot, He made mad a lot of his fellow admirals. He was the first Native American. He had about, I want to say, 1/16 Native American blood in him to go all the way through Annapolis and make it to the flag rank of admiral. The other thing about Joe Clark, he was not a pilot. And to get to this stage, by the time we launched carriers, even to be a captain, you had to be a pilot. You had to know how to fly an airplane. Joe was kind of a character. He walked around this area that you see right here, not all the time, but he was known to walk around in his pajamas, slippers, and a bathrobe. But he did have his admiral hat on. Who's going to tell an admiral he can't? Nobody. But what he did, he loved sailors. They knew his reputation and they loved him. He had an aide up here, and he called him Boy, and it wasn't racial. That's just what he called him. Boy was swapping the deck one day, mopping, and Jocko didn't like what he was doing. He says, Boy, hey, give me the mop. Let me show you what to do. And he didn't chastise him. He didn't call him an idiot. He managed to show him how to mop the deck. Well, instead of mopping one corner of the deck, Admiral Clark managed to mop the whole damn deck. So all the way out here, Jocko is mopping. And of course, can you imagine his aides are going, what the heck is this guy doing? You know, he's an admiral, for God's sakes, you know? So that's one story. The other story, we talked about ice cream. We have a place, you guys did the engine room tour. Did you go through the Geedunk?
Yeah.
The snack bar. Okay, it's a snack bar. Let's just call it that. The Navy used ice cream as not bribe, but rewards. So in other words, if you were a destroyer that in World War II that picked up one of our flyers, you got a bunch of ice cream in return. In fact, they wouldn't give you back the flyer until they got the ice cream. So we might do an unwrap and send you a couple, because carriers carried a lot of ice cream. It was really a treat for the sailors. As we got a modernization, you had helicopters. So if the helicopter returned one of your pilot, he got a free pass to the Geedunk and got ice cream. Well, the Geedunk is a little different than the mess halls.